In this session, we're going to take a look at the policy changes feature that's part of the security and compliance component in EventSentry. I'm here in the management console, and as you can see, I have the complete tracking package that's included by default expanded already, and the policy changes object is part of that package by default as well. You can see that there are not a whole lot of configuration options in here, just 4. And in most cases, it's recommended that you just have them all checked since they don't generate a whole lot of volume and do generate useful information that's very, very relevant, especially for security reasons. The types of changes that are tracked by these features are usually configured in a group policy or in the local security policy. So if I go here and go into the local security policy, and then go on the local policies, we see user rights assignments. And it's those changes, for example, that are tracked by user right changes and by logon right changes. For example, permission to change the system time, allow a local logon, adding workstations and other rights that are very important for security reasons. Logon as a service, for example. So those are the changes that are being tracked by logon right changes and user right changes, for example. Trust relationship changes are essentially events that are logged when there are trusts being created or removed or modified, for example. And domain audit and Kerberos policy changes are usually logged on domain controllers, such as a password policy being changed. So that's going to be picked up by this feature as well. As is the case with other security and compliance tracking features, you can configure EventSentry to turn the necessary auditing settings on here. Here we define which database the data is being written to. And if available, we can also receive the source IP and or host name of the user who made the changes. That information is only going to be available on a subset of these changes that are picked up in the event log, since Windows doesn't usually include the logon ID when these changes are logged. But let's take a look at the web reports to see what this looks like. I'm going to go to Features, Audit Policy, User Logon Rights. That's where I made the changes. We'll see that in the last 24 hours, 2 computers logged some changes here. I'm going to pick EventSentry. And I'm going to go straight to the Detail tab, where there is 4 changes here that occurred at the same time, and then another change 3 minutes later. The reason why they're all logged at the same exact time is not because the change was made at that time, but because that's when GP update ran in the background or was forced by the command line. So all these changes were downloaded from a domain controller through group policy and all applied at the same time. Since everything originates from events, we could actually sort this by the event number, and that way we can see exactly the timeline of what happened here. So we can see that from the user rights, from the restore files and directories user right, we had a number of user rights removed. The backup operators and administrators were removed, and then Franz Josef was added. We can also see that from the backup files and directories, Franz Josef was removed and backup operators was added. So this is what this would look like. So we don't have to look at the actual raw events here. It's not relevant. We can just interpret the results here, which is much easier to read. Source computer in this case is not available since the change originated from a group policy. Another very useful feature is the audit policy. So if we go here, we can see the status of all audit policies on your network. And these are not just the settings in a group policy, these are the actually active settings on all the monitored hosts. So if I pick a host here, for example, EventSentry, then I will see what audit settings are actually active on that host. So regardless of what's being said in various group policies and one or more group policies, this is what's actually active. This is a great way to verify that your group policy settings for auditing are actually sufficient. For example, if we are interested in audit failures, so which audit failures are actually being audited, then we can simply click yes here, go on details, go to details, and we can see all the audit features that are currently configured to audit failure. We can also go back here and say, okay, well, we want to see, let's remove the audit failure here again, and see, but where's audit failure not being audited? And now, if we click on details, then we can see where audit failures are not being audited. So there are a number of settings here that are not that relevant for security, and that's where audit failure is off, as is audit success. And if there's a specific setting that you're interested in, so let's go back to the overview here, and let's just say audit logon events here, then we can see exactly, okay, all of the servers here, all the machines that we're monitoring have audit success set to yes, and failures are off. So again, a great way to verify that specific audit settings are actually active on the domain. You can also see the history of audit changes. There may not be any data here. You can go back a little further here. All right, there's some data here. So here we could actually see when certain changes occurred to the audit policy. For example, we can see that on the workstations here, the authentication policy was set to success and failure. But again, the most useful part of this is just seeing what the audit policy is at any given time for any specific policy or subcategory. Very relevant settings, for example, are file system auditing. Right, that should be on everywhere. We can see, okay, that's enabled on all these hosts here. And since this feature also distinguishes between the computer type, server, domain controller, or workstation, you can easily filter this out here as well. And you can say, okay, I want to make sure that file system auditing on my servers is on, and filter it that way. Again, a feature that's very easy to configure. It does not generate a lot of data, but is very useful for keeping an eye on your audit policy settings and also on logon rights and user right changes, which can be relevant, especially from a security perspective.